Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are. And thank you for joining us for the second webinar. We have with us today four amazing speakers from different countries and organizations. This is an overview of K-12 online learning in Saudi Arabia, an international perspective. This is going to be an analysis of K-12 COVID-19 impact and developmental study. I'm happy to present Dr. Michelle Selinger. She is an international expert in educational technologies. Good morning, Michelle, and welcome back.
Good morning and hello everyone. And if you were here with us last week, welcome back. And if you're new, then really nice to meet you again today. So I want to welcome you to the second of these two webinars in which we've been discussing a research report on Saudi Arabia's response to COVID-19 in K-12 education. And we're providing an international perspective. So my name is Dr. Michelle Selinger, as you were just introduced to me, and I'm an independent expert on e-learning. I'm based in the UK, and I'm currently working as a consultant to the National E-Learning Centre. Thank you to NELC for this opportunity to chair this webinar. The Centre was established in 2017. It's an independent entity, and it's to enhance trust in e-learning programmes in the Kingdom. It supports digital transformation initiatives with a dedicated unit for researching, developing and testing new pedagogical models and developing standards and competencies for e-learning to provide support to all K-12 education institutions. Thank you for taking the time to join us for what we know will be an informative hour. We're going to start with Ben Scraggs, who is Director of Strategic Partnerships and Grants for the Open Learning Consortium, OLC. And he will start by presenting his overview of the report that his group was commissioned to undertake, just in case you missed that last week, and you can hear it again. It's very interesting. This research examined Saudi Arabia's response to K-12 education during the pandemic so that the country could better understand and continuously improve the state of online learning in the Kingdom. Last week, Dr. Fengchong Miao, Chief of the Unit for Technology and Artificial Intelligence in Education at UNESCO, gave an overview of Saudi's response and compared it to Finland, South Korea and China, including highlighting best practices. So today we have representatives from two of those countries, each who are going to give us more details of their country's responses to the pandemic, as well as their views of Saudi's response, so making that comparison. And then we have Jaakko Vuorio who is going to speak from the Finnish perspective, and Ji-Son Yu from South Korea. Jaakko is project coordinator of Assess at Learning for the Finnish National Agency for Education, and Ji-Son is senior researcher at the Korean Education Research Information Service, known as KERIS. I hope at the end there will be time for one or two questions or responses to their talk. So I'm going to now hand over to Ben. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Selinger. Great to be with you all today. Thank you for having me and the OLC by extension. I will share my screen and share my slides. All right. So thank you again for having us. And yes, my name is Ben Scraggs. I'm the Director of Strategic Partnerships and Grants with the Online Learning Consortium. The Online Learning Consortium started out as the Sloan Consortium back in 1999. And since then, we've been leading the leading professional online learning society devoted to advancing the quality e-learning into the mainstream of education through its community. The Online Learning Consortium today stands as one of the world's leading professional societies devoted to advancing quality online, distance and blended learning. And we leverage a diverse community of practitioners and advocates. And we proudly strive to create a community and knowledge around quality online blended digital learning while driving innovation. I see a hand raised there. I don't know if that's just for procedural methods or if there's a question I can answer right as we jump in. I'll keep rolling on. So first, I want to share a little bit about the context and the methodology for this report. The study was coordinated by the National E-Learning Center, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, in partnership with the OLC. And this report was international in focus and scope. OLC led the project with key partners from around the world, including a UNESCO Institute for Information Technologies and Education, the World Bank, the International Council for Open and Distance Education, the International Society for Technology and Education, the Association for Learning Technology, the European Distance and E-Learning Network, and the Data Research Center at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. This report represents phase 2 of an ongoing strategic partnership and research commitment to study, understand, and continuously improve the state of learning in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia during and after COVID-19, as well as a benchmark analysis on the Madrasati learning management system implemented nationwide in K-12 schools for the fall 2020 semester across the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. The phase 1 report was published in October of 2020, and it shared a data-driven analysis of stakeholder perceptions across the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia's K-12 education sectors in order to identify areas of excellence and determine areas for improvement. The Kingdom commissioned this developmental study to understand the state of online K-12 education during the fall 2020 semester, and also to begin envisioning a post-COVID environment. The phase 1 study chiefly affirmed that the pandemic required rapid acceleration in the development of fully online courses and a high volume of students. This phase 2 developmental study was launched in late 2020 and ran through early 2021. And these requirements were piled atop the needs already articulated in the nation's ambitious Vision 2030 agenda for education. This developmental study was conducted to analyze progress made on the recommended initiatives and measures the satisfaction of key stakeholders, challenges, as well as the opportunities for future investment against the 8 dimensions of the now comprehensive online learning framework. And we'll share that shortly. Overall, nearly 388,000 members of the Saudi Arabia education community participated in this phase 2 study, and that includes more than 191,000 surveys analyzed across 4 stakeholder groups, including administrators and leaders, educators, parents, and students. 69 participant interviews were conducted and analyzed to support qualitative findings, and more than 170 or 174 nations were benchmarked for online learning management solutions in the analysis of the Madrasati learning management system. Here you see the online learning evaluation framework in the 8 dimensions of leadership, curriculum design and planning, online teaching and learning, assessment, technology, student support, training support, and evaluation and continuous improvement. These 8 dimensions comprised the content for the surveys as well as the interviews that were conducted for this phase 2 study. To jump now to some summary of the findings, overwhelmingly, students, parents, teachers, and leaders reported satisfaction with the online learning in response to the COVID-19 global pandemic, resulting in emergency remote instruction and learning at a distance. But notably, as you can see in the graph here, or chart here, from phase 1 to phase 2, all 4 stakeholder groups participating in the study demonstrated a substantial increase in overall satisfaction, with each group reporting rates above 80%. Within that, notably, student satisfaction nearly doubled during phase 2, from 43% in phase 1 to more than 85%. The majority of students, parents, teachers, and principals reported satisfaction with their school's online education when asked about their overall satisfaction. And parents were also satisfied with learning support and resources, as well as communication from teachers and schools. Students and parents also felt strongly about students' active involvement in classes and the amount of work they completed. Across every dimension of the framework, student responses, stakeholder responses indicated satisfaction above 50% and frequently far above. Further, internal benchmarking across demographic groups within the data reveal internal consistency about the support and satisfaction with current online learning efforts. Here you see another snapshot from the report, surveying students and parents related to how efficiently the classes were run by teachers after moving to an online learning environment during COVID-19. You see a very high rate of satisfaction there. Students were surveyed on their ability to successfully complete all of their classes after moving online. Again, students answering close to 90% there. And then curiously, I felt I learned as much in my online classes as I would have if my class had been offered face-to-face. Again, more than 3 in 5 students and parents agreed with that statement. On the administrator and teachers side, over 90% of administrators and teachers agreed that their school's response to the pandemic supported quality online education and academic continuity. And over 80% of administrators and teachers shared that they would recommend their school strategically expand online learning opportunities in the future. Some notable findings within the stakeholder groups. Leaders found that technical staff are provided to support the learning environment and technology needs of teachers, and that students had access to appropriate support personnel to address technical and academic questions, problem reporting, and share complaints. Again, more than 91% of teachers reported their school's response to the pandemic supported quality online education, and more than 94% of teachers were satisfied with the communication from leadership. Among parents and students, areas of satisfaction for parents included learning support and resources, communication from teachers and schools, and the design, navigation, and organization of classes. For students, areas of satisfaction included the educational technologies used in their classes, along with technology support and resources, learning support and resources, and training and orientation to online learning. A quote here from one of the educators shared that online learning made me more creative and capable. The first thing I had to do was understand the students' strongest points and weakest points. I studied the learners' needs in order to best support them. And one school leader shared, the pandemic forced us to use a new method of leadership. And in fact, it proved to all of us our capabilities in planning and abilities to overcome all the challenges. The distribution of roles was really important too, to overcome all the obstacles and problems in order to succeed and achieve our goals. Some key themes that emerged throughout the study were really that students improved digital literacy skills, and this is among the most promising areas of growth and satisfaction, was also the administrator perspective about digital literacy, the use of digital tools and the ability to work in digital environments. Similarly, 93.9% of principals identified improvement in student skills, and almost 96% of principals and staff saw improvement in teachers' skills. These indicators are strong and suggestive of the opportunity of digital learning to continue informing and playing a role in the holistic education landscape of Saudi Arabia and in the post-pandemic world. A second key theme that emerged was online learning as a strategic choice for the future. We've seen the finding already that both educators and administrators would support teaching again in a fully online environment. Educators were open to the expansion of online learning, and perhaps most important, the majority of students and parents would recommend that their schools strategically expand online learning in the future. Again, over 80% of administrators and teachers indicated their strong agreement that if given the opportunity, they would look forward to offering fully online instruction at their schools again. And lastly, Madrasati emerged as a leader of internally developed platforms. Nearly 6 million users of the platform were engaged in the fall of 2020 during its launch. Given that launch, so I'm just caught up in that number, 6 million for a platform that was launched in the fall, was really striking in our analysis of LMS solutions across the globe. The study also came with some recommendations and next steps. And related to recommendations for online learning, one of the recommendations was to ensure that students have access to a laptop, internet, and a supportive study environment, that students are provided strategies for skill building, and parents for time management, organization, and technology work productivity applications through an online learning readiness intervention. It was also recommended to implement professional development for online teaching with teacher incentives to improve the use and time of engagement for students, and to update policy, regulations, and standards into alignment to support high-quality online learning. Recommendations for the Madrasati LMS included more mobile capability for use on mobile devices, as well as nationwide broadband infrastructure and device support expansion, commensurate with infrastructure needs across the globe. There was also indication that feature support for adaptive learning and analytics might be a fruitful next step, as well as expanded teacher professional learning, training, and support. The results of the analysis also yielded a new developing framework for what online learning in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia may look like in the future. And in closing, I just want to share thanks to the Ministry of Education and the National E-Learning Center for your willingness to partner in the study, and to share that OLC is interested in continuing this partnership and watching these investments in quality online learning have strong results to support the students in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Well, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben. That was very informative. I think that graph, that bar chart, is very indicative of how the confidence of teachers and students' familiarization with the learning online changed and improved over time. Madrasati being launched and the synchronous classes. And I think it's a very good benchmark for blended learning going forward. Now, we do have one question, but I'd like to take questions right at the end. So we haven't ignored your question, Abdullah. We will come back to it. But thank you very much, Ben. And I will now hand over to, I think it's Jaakko. Is that right? Yes, it's Jaakko from Finland. Thank you. I couldn't remember which way round it was. So thank you very much and lovely to meet you. And I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much. Just a moment, I will share my presentation. Okay, can everyone see the presentation? I think so. Yep. Can you see the presentation?
Yes, yes, we can.
Okay.
Yeah, you probably want to put it on full screen. I'm seeing the second slide. We're seeing it in presenter mode at the moment.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah. Oh. What's happened? We've lost you, Jaakko. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
It's a quick moment. So I will.
Lost your image as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Can you see the presentation now?
Yeah, that's fine now. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry for inconvenience. All right. My name is Jaakko Vuorio. I'm working at the Finnish National Agency for Education. So we have a two-tier structure in ministry. We have the Ministry of Education and Culture, and then we have the Finnish Agency for Education. That is a development agency. So we are involved in every levels of education system in Finland, especially in the K-12 area. Today I'm gonna talk you about the report that we just saw saw in the previous presentation, some of the findings. I'm gonna talk about what I found kind of like interesting, and then try to kind of like mirror these results or findings to what we have learned in the Finnish context regarding how all the things went during COVID-19 and how things are kind of like evolving today regarding the COVID-19, digital learning and distance learning. So first of all, I think the whole report was highly interesting. And the reasons are because there was so high level of respondents, and the satisfaction rates from phase 1 to phase 2 across all stakeholders, students, caregivers, parents, teachers, and so on. So it is absolutely remarkable achievement to kind of like gain such a high number of respondents, which of course makes the whole report quite valuable, and all the numbers that state these findings are more or less highly reliable. What I found really interesting was that the reports across stakeholder groups stated that online learning was comparable to learning that takes place in the on-site classes. So when I'm drawing this to the Finnish context, where we have witnessed pretty much the same kind of like challenges during COVID-19, that some of the devices weren't working, or we had some issues with internet connections in schools and so on, or we have some other challenges with digital learning environments. I found that in this KSA report, I found that this was the satisfaction rate was quite high. And when we talk about whether we should go back to this normal on-site class, or should we somehow expand the learning to online environments, I found this really interesting. So one other thing was also that the improvement of ICT skills improved quite remarkably in both teacher and student groups, and this is of course an interesting finding that is something that we in Finnish context have to also take a closer look, because we have kind of like similar challenges also with the ICT skills, both with teachers and students. And of course, the whole Madrasity learning management system as a centralized digital learning platform for K-12 level is really interesting. It's interesting because not that many countries have a centralized system or internally developed system. And this Madrasati kind of like history and how you guys made it, what sort of development progress was made, what other systems were benchmarked, all these materials in the report are really highly highly interesting, because they give the kind of like story of the Madrasati and how it was made. And this is a really valuable benchmark for any country or any education system that is trying to create something new and trying to learn from other countries. So I think Madrasati is one of these really interesting benchmark internationally. Then there was a lot of discussion regarding support mechanism, device policies, and also equal access to digital resources. And all of these findings in the report are, of course, in a way universal in other countries as well, because every country that has some sort of digital infrastructure in schools, or have some devices, or they are using digital learning environments in schools during the COVID-19, they all have these same problems. The teachers are reporting they lack support, or there are some other country level policy policy stuff going on that needs to be changed to some other direction. And of course, there is always the question of equal access to devices, to internet, and so on. And of course, pre and in-service training of teachers and school staff is highly important. I think it's also important in Finland because what we have witnessed during COVID-19 is that our teacher training is of course, there's a lot of good things what we have done during the past years and decades, but now that we have witnessed the sheer kind of like importance of having these digital skills with teachers, it's something that we have to also change in our teacher training system. So when we go to some comparisons or we talk about Finnish context, I just want to show you a slide about where is Finland and what sort of kind of like key figures we have. So Finland is of course a part of the European Union, and we are at the far east corner of Europe. In a way, we are an island, so to say. Education, we spend to education average expenditure is roughly 9,305 euros per student in primary level. Education is publicly funded, free for all, and we don't have any private schools in Finland. Schools offer transportation, health and social care, school meals, everything is free. Teachers have a master's degree, and we don't inspect schools or teachers or students. So when we go to Finnish context, Finland is highly decentralized education system. So we don't have a well, of course we have central government, we have ministries and so on, but we don't have a centralized system in a way that the central government doesn't control education that much, so to say. So we have municipalities that arrange education. So that being said, the ministries have to kind of like focus on systemic change and policies, because we cannot say that we just created a digital learning environment, or we created this or that and now schools are obligated to use something. No, but we have to interact with municipalities, cities, and their own governments or educational administrations in a way to get something changed or something done. So before COVID-19, some figures about Finnish schools. We have had the best wireless connections in schools. We are number one in European Union Digitalized Economies and Societies Index. And schools device ratio in primary was roughly 1:4. So every 4 students had one device. Secondary education students had almost 100% of them had devices, and teachers' ICT skills were moderate, but variation of course occurred quite much. So when we talk about that we are decentralized education system, we do not have a nationwide learning platform. So we have these well-known big tech companies, Microsoft, Google, and Apple, and every school uses either Microsoft or Google platform. So Google Classroom or Microsoft education tools. Then we have a student administration system called Wilma, and then we have all of these educational technology companies that you guys also know quite well, international companies that some of the schools just buy those services. Then we have digital content and publishers. Publishers in Finland are really kind of like big players in delivering learning content. we have a quite long history with mobile technology and internet and computers, and households were quite ready when we talk about COVID-19. Households had already internet connections and devices. So just a few numbers about Finnish households. Basically in Finland, the internet connections kind of like domesticated and expanded during early 90s. Today, every household have computers, some sort of device. Internet connections are everywhere, and this is because Finland is really rural country. So back in the 90s, the government and policymakers saw this as an opportunity to kind of like civilize the society, to create really expansive internet connections to every city, every rural city as well. And that is why in Finland, for example, data price, mobile broadband data packages are really inexpensive compared to other European nations. So when we go to comparison, we talk about Madrasati. That is a centralized learning platform. We have been talking in the Finnish National Agency for Education. We have been talking throughout these COVID-19 years with other countries in the European Union, and there are some countries that have centralized systems or are planning to implement one. But I think Madrasati is a really interesting benchmark as a centralized, internally developed learning platform. When comparing to Finland, we have a lot of different learning platforms, and we have a lot of variation across municipalities. So one problem with these multiple platforms is that there is a high risk that we treat our students in a different way because we have a variation with learning platforms. And when we are trying to treat the students equally and create this equity, so that is a really important aspect. Should we have a national one solution, as KSA now has? High levels of satisfaction to online learning. We also witnessed high levels of satisfaction to this, how this distance learning was executed in Finland. But when the COVID-19 continued and schools continued to offer distance learning, the kind of like dissatisfaction seemed to increase, since there was these social issues that kind of like raised during the distance learning. And that is the kind of like equity perspective, is equality, mental health, and loss of social connection and friends. And that is one thing that we are trying to figure out, that how could we create online learning experience that could endorse social connection, create sense of community, and so on. In Saudi Arabia, positive experiences were experienced from online learning, and as I read, there was this kind of like thinking of expanding online learning post-COVID times. So I think in Finland we are also strategically thinking about what are we going to do with online learning in the future. And we have done online learning before COVID-19 already, but not in this scale. So what are we going to do? There is a lot of positive experiences, and a lot of teachers have kind of like emancipated, so to say, with digital devices, with online learning, with Microsoft Teams, video conferencing tools, and other things. Like many of the teachers have started to become YouTubers and so on. So there's a lot of positive experiences, but that's not the case with all teachers. So we have a sense of strong mutual understanding that across teachers, parents, students, school leaders and so on to maintain this face-to-face learning as the modus operandi, the way to do it whenever possible, since that is something that all of our stakeholders actually wanted. Many of the students have exhausted and they are done with online learning and they want to go back to schools. We have kept our education system quite open during COVID-19, and we only closed K-12 schools for 60 days during spring 2020. And after that, we have been in this hybrid scenario that schools have been partly open and partly closed, depending on the situation with COVID-19. But still, there has been a lot of disruption in schools. The schools have been closed, and we have been jumping on and off with distance learning, online learning. So I think that is something that teachers are now fed up, and they want to just have this normal face-to-face learning. But in a way, when we wrap up my presentation here, I found the Madrasati learning management system really interesting. I would say an international benchmark for every country or education system that is thinking of creating a national LMS system to provide online learning experiences. I think the report findings and all the respondents numbers, the satisfaction rates and experiences that I read from the report were really interesting and gave a lot of insight to learn how things were developed with Madrasati and what sort of internal issues or future development aspects are there. And there was, what I've also found quite interesting was that many of these challenges that you have witnessed with Madrasati or in Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, what you have witnessed with online learning, many of these problems or challenges are really the same, whether it's Finland or some other European country. I've been learning a lot of things from United States, Australia, Asia as well. And many of these aspects and challenges are universal. Everybody has those same challenges, whether it's teacher training, whether it's devices, internet connections, how to create an interaction or better user experience with online learning. Many of these are pretty much the same problems. And that makes this report remarkable because it's kind of like condenses all of this information into a really nice package where education systems, agencies, researchers can learn how to create a national learning management system. So I thank you, and I will end my presentation here and hope to learn much new stuff from Madrasati in this coming presentations. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Jakob. Very interesting. Really, really interesting. Everyone wants to know about Finland because you do get such high scores in all the international comparisons. So really nice to get that wonderful compliment about Madrasati. One of the things that I thought about from your talk was around the length of time of school closures being probably the factor that was causing dissatisfaction. It's something that we found here in the UK as well, that students it's the social issues that really started to get to students not being able to see their friends in person, really did have a huge impact on their mental health. And I think perhaps, and I'm not absolutely sure how long Saudi will close down for, but I do think that does make a significant difference, and it certainly was an international comparison on that. And I think, going forward, this idea of having online learning and teachers having digital skills is absolutely crucial. because if students are sick, they can get that continuity of lessons, or if there is some other reason they can't be in school. So that's something that's certainly worth more discussion, as well as we move to a potentially more of a blended learning scenario. So, okay, now I'm going to hand over to Ji-sun, who from Korea, and South Korea, and she will tell us about her experience and compare it to Saudi's. Thank you, Ji-sun. Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. Let me just share my screen. Can everyone see the screen?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Good morning to most of you. My name is Ji-sun Yu from CARIS. I work in the Global Cooperation section of CARIS. I'm in charge of carrying out various international projects with international organizations and also partner countries. I must say I'm thrilled to meet everyone here during this pandemic. Also, I would like to congratulate the great outcomes of K-12 online learning study and Saudi Arabia's successful policy implementation on behalf of CARIS. And I personally enjoyed learning the similarities and differences of measures taken in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and in Korea. Above all, I would like to point out that all of us were faced to overcome the sudden educational challenge, and the use of ICT in education and online learning was a tool to minimize the education loss. It was fortunate for both Saudi Arabia, Finland, and Korea that we put emphasis on the online learning even before the COVID-19 pandemic. Okay, let me start by sharing how Korean education changed and evolved to overcome the learning loss caused by COVID-19. I will start with the school closure last year and our initial responses and the online platforms we utilized and how we prepared for the online classes. So Korea was one of the first countries struck with COVID-19 pandemic. It started early January last year, so the schools stopped since then. Our first day of school is March, but it has been postponed for a month. The unexpected school closure brought up the sudden blending of online and offline learning in schools. The high schoolers started their online classes in early April last year, and younger students a few weeks later. The difference is because of the capacity of the platform server and the degree of awareness of digital devices, as well as the digital literacy. Korea developed its first master plan to integrate ICT into education from the 80s, but never experienced the full transition to online schooling. Okay, there were two platforms that we used. CARIS was responsible for one, and EBS, the education broadcast system, I think it's similar to IEM that's mentioned in the report, was responsible for the another. So in the sense of infrastructure, 99.7% of Korean households already had access to the internet. And in addition to that, the Korean government had made agreement with the mobile carrier companies to provide free data for all education contents. Korea and Saudi Arabia share the common idea of supporting online courses for a high volume of students. First, CARIS and EBS expanded the online infrastructure so we can handle 6 million users simultaneously. The capacity of CARIS e-learning website was elevated to 3 million in 2 weeks, and EBS online classes to 3 million as well. EBS also launched new public broadcast channel to meet specific needs of different school years. This was critical to first and second graders of the elementary schools who are not familiar with using digital devices. At the same time, we increased the number of online learning resources. More than 5,000 new learning materials were added to Kara's e-learning site, which I think is similar to Madrasa T-Learning platform, and 43,000 new materials on EBS channel. The government authorized 497 textbooks in e-book format and 134 textbooks in digital textbook format. Other than that, learning materials developed in the private sector were also uploaded to the biggest portal website of Korea and also to the Kara's platform. The Ministry of Education also relaxed regulations regarding copyright for more flexible use and participation in remote and blended learning. By the way, the copyright of educational materials was already comparably generous in Korea. Along with the expansion of infrastructure and materials, there were attempts to empower the teachers' digital capacities. At the end of the day, it is always the teachers who hold the greatest importance. And for some teachers, it was the biggest challenge ever for them to conduct the class online without a period of preparation. To share best practices of online classes, 495 schools were designated as pilot schools for online learning. Kara's also constructed a website called School On and Teacher On to accelerate peer support among teachers. School On is an online learning community for teachers to share information and resources on online platform and tools and exchange ideas and insights on teaching and classroom management. Teacher On is a support solution service that remotely connects to the computers or mobile devices of the users to resolve any technical difficulties. Teachers with difficulties handling the device or conducting online classes could get help through Teacher On, and lead teachers voluntarily provided one-to-one consulting and remote control of computers. As for the top-to-bottom approach, the government initiated the community of 10,000 representative teachers. There are roughly 11,000 schools in Korea, and one teacher from each school were to join the community and exchange ideas and insights with different bodies, including the Ministry of Education, regional offices of education, Kara's, and also EBS. As a result, the number of education resources developed by teachers had increased remarkably, as shown in the chart. Starting a school year completely online was the first trial for all of us. Thus, we had to revise and improve standards or guidelines of online learning. Before the crisis, there were few rules or standards on online classes. Now we came up with new rules to follow on checking students' attendance, evaluation process, and record keeping of school's transcript. These are some guidelines spread to schools for a successful online learning. For stable access, for example, let me read some of the rules, guidelines. So for stable access, use wired or wireless internet online classes. Students and teachers must access Kara's e-learning site and EBS online class in advance. Schools are to be flexible with class hours based on individual school conditions. and produce educational content in the standard definition level or lower. Teachers and students are recommended to upload or download materials a day earlier, preferably after 5 p.m. And for the safe use of the internet platform, we must set password for video conference room and must not disclose the link address. We must not use insecure video conference platform and must install security patch before use. Security vaccine programs are required, and we must not distribute photos of teachers and students that have been on the screen during the class. So far, these were the key concepts we carried throughout the chaotic online schooling. In the K-12 online learning in Saudi Arabia report, it was impressive to find that the satisfaction levels from all groups were fairly high, given the hardship they faced during the COVID. In some households in Korea last year, it was just too difficult for some parents to guide their children's learning at home and continue their career at the same time. Also, Saudi Arabian government took a comprehensive approach in their transition from offline to online learning, including leadership, curriculum, student support, and technology. I think this was the key point for the successful outcome. And additionally, the core platform, Madrasati platform, it kind of shares the same characteristic with the Korean one, is that it is a national level platform. Along with the platform, the framework for successful LMS components could be of a great use for international society. For recommendation from Korea, the first one is the learning outcome research would be helpful in addition to the current satisfaction survey result. I believe this would be possible after a few years of operation. It was mentioned in the report that the digital literacy level has increased during the pandemic. So an annual assessment of digital literacy for students and also the teachers would be of a great help to evaluate the effect of online learning. Also, I recommend Korean case of School On and Teacher On as a peer coaching platform for teachers' professional development. And here are some best practices that we did as for recommendation. Let me introduce some initiatives for resolving the digital divide. I'm not sure if the digital divide is even a problem in Saudi Arabia, but let me introduce what we did. The Korean government did supply free digital device for students from low-income families, and also provided zero rating policy for free access to educational websites. And all these different private sectors, including Samsung, LG, and also some banks and public companies offered free digital devices in rental and technical assistance as well. And I think we had a question from the audience for the students with disabilities. We provided special learning packets and materials with home visits. And for the students with various disabilities, we provide different contents in different formats. For example, we have different content for visually impaired students or hearing impaired students. And also we have some students from multicultural families whose language level is not fluent enough to continue their learning online. So we provided information materials in various languages. To sum up, I delivered how Korea had overcame the education challenges that we had. We are still in the process of catching up with the normal education we had back in the days. I hope this brought some insight on what we can do together for the better learning of students. Thank you. That's all for my presentation.
Thank you very much, Jason. That was very interesting. It's so interesting to have Finland and South Korea on this call because of you had a centralized system like Saudi and Finland had a very decentralized system. So very interesting to hear the comparisons between the two. And what was interesting, I think, about yours was the just-in-time support system that you had for teachers, which is so important to give them that confidence. And it's all part of the digital literacy skills that you're trying to build that Jaakko talked about as well. And I think the idea of having one teacher per school in that community to feed back to the MOE, again, was a very innovative solution. So I mean, you know, what's fantastic about this is that we are learning so much from each other, and these sorts of webinars really make a significant difference to that. So we have a couple of questions, but really the focus on these questions is very much about special needs. But I think what I'd like to focus on is on that last question, which I put into Google Translate, and it's what's the best methods of evaluating distance learning. And this is a question for all of you. So if we can finish with that, maybe each of you coming back with a question. So we start with Ben, then go to Jaakko, and then to Jason in the order in which you spoke. So Ben, what do you think are the best methods of evaluation of this sort of moving to online learning?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks for asking it, Dr. Salinger. The first, one of the pieces that comes to mind in our partnership with the Ministry of Education, the National E-Learning Center, has been the frameworks that they've been developing. And so part of that speaks to your purpose, your kind of your aspirations and what you're hoping to achieve. And so I think having kind of a national framework or organized framework for what you're prioritizing or what you aim to see is a really important first step. So I think having that in place is really important. And then from there, I think of lots of kind of existing measures, at least in the United States, though I'll share a link here. The Online Learning Consortium, for example, has a scorecard or several scorecards that are publicly available for how we delineate quality and how we start to think about how to measure and how to strive for quality in establishing online learning. I know that setting national standards for online learning is also a priority in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So I think those are things to think about. You start with a framework for what it is you're aiming to achieve, and then think about setting some scorecards and some standards that are geared to that, based around research best practice. And I think what we've all kind of touched on here is the comparative and cooperative learning across the globe that we're seeing. And I think that's one important piece of that as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. I've just noticed that the e-learning centre, National E-Learning Centre, would like to respond as well, but we'll let them go. We'll let them go last. So over to you, Jaakko.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, how to assess? I would say, well, we at the agency, we have compiled all of these Finnish reports and Finnish research evidence to one national report. And all of those data have been gathered from mainly from spring 2020, when globally everyone went to this distance learning mode. So, and that is a really interesting report because it kind of like shows all of these stakeholders in different data packages. For instance, we have these traditional research data from universities, and then we have a lot of evidence also gathered by the trade unions or student associations. And of course, all of those data and research data are different, and they have been gathered methodologically differently. But still, when we look at the student association survey data, we see that students are dissatisfied with certain things. When we look at trade union surveys from teachers, they have some other kind of like worries And then when we look at the research data from universities, which is maybe in the highest peak of reliability and evidence, we have similar outcomes, and we have different more deeper knowledge from that data. So I would just test that if one wants to kind of like learn how things are evolving, there isn't a one day data from one pool. You have to gather quite a lot of evidence from the research. You have to gather evidence from learning management system data, learning analytics. You have to gather traditional survey data from caregivers and for instance, Parents League or some other association as well. And then you might have kind of like holistic picture that what are caregivers saying, what are students saying, and what are teachers saying, and kind of like try to use some sort of method to create an evidence-based and informed outcome to develop educational system, for instance.
Yeah. Yes, and of course, the larger the data set and the breadth of the data set is going to make a difference as well. Thank you. Jason.
Oh, yes. For the best method for evaluation for online learning, I think pandemic was a kind of a tool for the evaluation for online learning, because I just mentioned that Korea started our master plan for ICT in education from the 80s. And the evaluation for the effectiveness of online learning was still, for more than 30 years, was our biggest question. How can we measure the effectiveness? But with the pandemic, we were kind of prepared for the online schooling at that time. So it just shed a light to our result. And also, I think the measurement of learning outcomes would be the easiest way to evaluate the effectiveness. I'm not saying we are to compare the test grade of the students before COVID and after COVID. I'm saying we should look at the learning gap, the digital divide. Actually, in Korea, one of our problem is the polarization of the grade. The students with higher grades tend to be more in the COVID era, and the students with lower grades increase in the era, but the middle, no, they decrease. I think that is the biggest problem here. So we should look at the learning outcomes of the students and to see how they are overcoming the learning gap in the era of online learning.
That's very, very, very important. I think that it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, actually in the UK, it was students at the lower end who didn't have access across and the digital divide became much bigger. You know, the gap was huge when we found that. So it's interesting that you had something different there. Right. Well, I think we are well over time here. I mean, this has been a very interesting discussion, and there are some other questions, but we don't have time. It was only an hour, this webinar. And people have to get to work or to bed in terms for Ben. So I want to thank the National E-Learning Centre again for this webinar and for this opportunity. To Ben Scraggs from OLC, from Yisun Yu from South Korea, and from Jakub Joria from Finland for their fantastic contributions. It's been very interesting. And this will be available on YouTube, so you will be able to watch it again or get your colleagues to watch it. So thank you everyone for joining, and have a good day.
Thank you everyone. It's a pleasure having you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.